I used to think our mornings were boring in a healthy, adult way. You know the type. 2 mugs, 2 schedules, 1 half-dead plant on the windowsill that somehow survived 3 winters out of pure spite. My wife moved through the kitchen like she owned time itself. Crisp blouse, hair perfectly done, the kind of calm you see in people who never lose arguments because they charge by the hour. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring it like the answer was irrelevant. "Do I look like a man who says no to caffeine?" I said. "If I ever refuse coffee, check my pulse." She smirked without looking up. That was her specialty, smirking like the judge had already ruled in her favor. She was an attorney. Not just an attorney, her own firm, her name on the door, her assistant afraid of breathing too loudly near her desk. The kind of woman who could make a parking ticket feel like a felony if you talked back. I loved that about her once. Now it mostly meant I spent my married life feeling like I was dating the final boss of a legal drama. We did our little morning dance. Keys, wallets, phone checks. She kissed me, quick, polished, efficient. Like signing a document. "Big day," she said, scanning her calendar on her phone. "Every day is big when you're saving the world one lawsuit at a time," I said. "I don't save the world," she replied. "You're right," I nodded. "You bill the world." She laughed. Real laugh. Warm. That laugh used to disarm me every time. It still did, which annoyed me. Like finding out a weapon you hate still works perfectly. We left together. 2 cars, 2 directions. Normal, clean, safe. She waved as she backed out. I waved back. And then the universe, being the universe, waited exactly long enough for my coffee to hit my bloodstream before it decided to throw me off a cliff. I was at my desk, barely 20 minutes into pretending I cared about emails, when my phone buzzed. A push notification from our home security system. "Front door disarmed." I stared at it. We didn't disarm it. We never disarmed it unless we were coming home. I looked at the time. Middle of the morning. Both of us had just left. My brain tried to be reasonable first. Maybe the system is glitched. Then the other part of my brain, my inner disaster director, leaned in. "Or someone is in your house." My fingers moved before my pride could argue. I called my wife. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice already halfway into professional mode. "Hey, where are you?" I asked. A beat. "At work." "Why?" "Nothing, I just wanted to hear your voice." "Okay, I won't bother you. Go save the world," I said. I hung up and stared at my work monitor. I didn't mention the alarm on purpose because I didn't want to put my wife in danger in case it wasn't a system glitch. I decided to figure everything out myself. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out without telling anyone. If my boss asked, I'd tell him the truth. My house might have been invaded, and I'd rather not be a responsible adult about it. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every red light turned personal. Every slow car in front of me felt like a conspiracy. My hands were steady on the wheel. I wasn't panicking. What I was doing was compiling evidence of doom. When I turned onto our street, my chest tightened. There was a car in our driveway, my wife's car, and another one. My first instinct was to slam the brakes and charge the front door like a movie idiot. My second instinct, stronger, was to breathe. Because I wasn't about to be the guy who gets arrested in his own driveway while the real problem sits inside and watches. I parked down the street behind a tall hedge that probably belonged to someone who also didn't trust people. Then I walked, quietly, like I was sneaking up on my own life. I stood near the edge of the driveway, heart doing that slow, heavy thing, like it was dropping weights inside my ribcage. I didn't go to the door. I went to the side of the house, where the living room window revealed just enough from the right angle. I looked in. At first, I saw movement, a shadow crossing the room, a man's shoulders. Then my wife stepped into view. She wasn't in her at-work outfit. She was in one of those soft housetops that said, "I'm comfortable," the kind she wore on Sundays when she made pancakes, like our marriage was a commercial. She was smiling. And then he stepped closer. A man. Tall. Familiar posture. Slight tilt of the head like he knew the room belonged to him. And I knew him. It was Greg. From before. From a life I'd lived before we moved here. A guy I used to know. Not a best friend. Not an enemy. Just someone from the old circles. Someone who'd shared beers, jokes, and the kind of casual familiarity you forget until it walks into your window like a nightmare with a face. My stomach dropped, and there he was, in my house, with my wife, in the middle of the morning, while she told me she was at work. They were close, too close for he stopped by, too close for old friend visiting. And then he touched her, light, confident, like he'd done it before. She didn't flinch, she didn't step back. She leaned in. That's the moment where most men become loud. The moment where they kick the door, scream, break something, demand answers, become a story on the local news. I did none of that. Not because I'm noble, because I'm not stupid. I stood there, watching, while my mind did something weird. It went calm. Not peaceful calm. Cold calm. Like a courtroom right before the verdict. I saw them move deeper into the room, out of view. Heard nothing. No dramatic sounds. Just the quiet normalness of a betrayal that felt practiced. And suddenly, the security notification made perfect sense. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a burglar. It was my wife welcoming her guest. I backed away from the window, turned, and walked back toward the street like I wasn't carrying a burning building inside my chest. I got into my car and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from doing something irreversible. I wasn't going to confront her at home. Not yet. Home confrontations are messy, emotional, loud. They end with accusations and denials, and me being painted as the unstable husband who misunderstood. And my wife? My wife was an attorney, a professional manipulator with a law degree. If I walked into my own living room furious, I'd be the villain before I finished my first sentence. So I did the one thing she'd never expect. I used her own world against her, her office, her clean little kingdom where everything was organized and everyone called her Ms., with fear in their throats. If she had a secret life, it wouldn't live in my living room. It would live behind passwords, in calendars, in emails, in documents. So I wiped my face, checked the mirror, and practiced the expression every married man learns eventually. Neutral. Then I drove away from my house, to her law firm. I pulled into the building lot 20 minutes later and parked like I belonged there. Because technically, I did. I was her husband. The lobby smelled like expensive air freshener and lawsuits. Her firm's name was on the wall in sleek letters. Her last name. Our last name. It looked so clean. So respectable. I walked in, and the receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Hi, can I help you?" "Yes," I said, returning the smile. "I'm here to grab something my wife asked me to bring her." The lie slid out smooth. I hated that it was so easy. "Of course," she said. "She's in court prep, but I can let her assistant know you're here." "No need," I said quickly. "It's time sensitive. She'll kill me if I interrupt her, you know how she is." The receptionist laughed nervously, like she absolutely knew how she was. A moment later, her assistant appeared. Young, efficient, eyes always half scared like she lived in permanent deadline mode. "Hi," she said. "I just need to grab the document from her desk. I'll be out in 2 minutes," I said. The assistant hesitated, and I watched the calculation in her eyes. Policy versus fear of my wife versus the fact that I was the husband. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll walk you in." Perfect. We went down the hall, past framed diplomas and motivational legal quotes that all basically translated to, "Everyone lies." The assistant opened the door to my wife's office. Her space was immaculate. Dark wood, neat piles, a perfect pen alignment that screamed, "Control issues." Her laptop sat closed on the desk, like a safe waiting to be cracked. The assistant stepped aside. "I'll be right outside, just let me know if you need anything." "Thanks," I said warmly. She left, closing the door softly behind her. And there I was, alone in my wife's office, staring at her laptop. My hands didn't shake, not yet. I moved like I'd rehearsed it. I opened the laptop. The screen lit up. Password prompt. Of course. I stared at it, and for a second I almost laughed again, because this was the part where most husbands realize they don't actually know their wives. But I did know her. My wife didn't make complicated passwords. She made arrogant ones. I tried her birthday. No. I tried our anniversary. No. I tried the name of the firm. No. I exhaled slowly and typed the one thing she loved most besides winning, her own name. Enter. The desktop opened. I smiled. Of course, I whispered, and then my stomach tightened again, because now it was real. Now I wasn't imagining anything. Now I was digging. I started with the obvious: email, calendar, files, moving fast, eyes scanning like I was looking for a specific kind of poison. Nothing. No suspicious folder named "Not an Affair." No email chains titled "Cheating with Greg." Just work, cases, billing, appointments, clean, too clean. That's when I noticed something on the desk near the corner. A book. One of those thick hardcovers she kept around to look cultured. The kind of thing you buy and never open. It was slightly out of place, not aligned. My wife aligned everything. I reached for it, meaning to move it back, and my fingers caught on the edge. The book shifted oddly in my hands. Light, hollow. I frowned. Then I opened it. Not pages, a hidden compartment. My breath stopped. Inside were folded papers, envelopes, letters, carefully stacked like evidence. My mouth went dry, because no one hides normal things in a fake book. And deep down, I already knew what I was about to read. I picked up the top envelope. The handwriting was masculine, confident, familiar. Greg. I stared at his name until it blurred. Then I unfolded the letter with slow precision, like I was handling something radioactive. And I started to read. I expected something explosive, confession, passion, poetry written by a man who thought he was the main character in someone else's marriage. Instead, the first line was calm, casual, almost polite. That somehow felt worse. I still keep thinking about Sicily. I stopped breathing for a second. My eyes kept moving down the page, even though every instinct told me to fold the letter, put it back, and return to the safe illusion of ignorance. Those mornings by the water felt unreal. No deadlines, no courtrooms, just you, finally relaxed. Relaxed. I almost smiled at that word, because I couldn't remember the last time she'd been relaxed with me. With me, she was efficient, scheduled, structured. Relaxation, apparently, was a benefit package offered to other men. I kept reading. He thanked her for the hotel, for the view, for those quiet evenings that felt stolen from another life. That line sat in my chest like a small, precise blade. I lowered the letter slowly and stared at the wall of her office, at the framed diploma that suddenly looked less like an achievement and more like a warning label I'd ignored. Sicily. She told me she'd been in London that week. Work meetings, clients, long days, bad hotel coffee. I remembered the phone calls. Short, tired, professional. I remembered telling people how proud I was of her. My hand tightened slightly around the paper, not shaking, just firmer. Like I needed to remind my fingers they still belonged to me. One letter doesn't prove everything, I told myself. Lawyers love proof, and I had married one. So I put the letter down carefully, exactly where it had been, because panic leaves fingerprints, and I was no longer interested in being sloppy. Then I turned back to the laptop. Calendar first. If you want to understand someone's real life, don't read their words, read their schedule. I opened the month from the date mentioned in the letter. There it was. London, client meetings, 5 days. Neat, official, boring, perfect. If I didn't know about Sicily, it would have looked completely normal. Responsible even. The kind of entry that makes a husband feel guilty for ever doubting his hardworking wife. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull of denial. Maybe Greg was remembering an old trip. Maybe the timing was different. Maybe I was about to become one of those paranoid husbands people whisper about at dinner parties. So I opened her email. Because denial deserves a fair trial. Search bar. Date range. Airline. Results appeared instantly. 2 tickets. Same departure day as the London trip. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. I opened the confirmation email. Destination. Palermo. No poetry. No drama. Just plain corporate font truth. Below that, another email. Hotel booking. 2 guests. Of course, lawyers don't improvise affairs. They document them. A strange thought drifted through my mind. She planned this carefully. Calendar lie, work story, clean, elegant, defensible. I almost respected the strategy. I leaned back in her chair slowly, staring at the ceiling of the office she built, the life we built, the story I clearly hadn't been the main character of for a while. Footsteps passed in the hallway outside the door. Real world. Time moving. People living ordinary lives while mine quietly rearranged itself. I closed the email, closed the calendar, closed the laptop. Carefully. Exactly how I'd found it. Then I returned the letter to the envelope to the hidden compartment. The fake book to its perfect alignment. No trace. If this was going to become a war, I wasn't going to make the first loud move. I stood there for a moment in silence, feeling the weight of a decision forming. Not emotional, not dramatic. Cold, simple, final. But not today. Today I needed one more thing. Her version. Not because I believed it. Because I wanted to hear how beautifully she could lie. I opened the office door. Her assistant looked up immediately, like she'd been timing my breathing. "Did you find it?" she asked. "Yeah," I said calmly. Exactly where she said it would be. Technic ally true, just not the document she meant. I thanked her, smiled like a normal husband with a normal errand, and walked out through the lobby carrying absolutely nothing in my hands and far too much inside my head. Outside, the air felt different, sharper, like the world had quietly switched genres while I was indoors. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, eyes unfocused. Morning had started with coffee and routine. Now I knew my wife had another life in Sicily, and a man who wrote letters about it. I checked the time, a few hours until evening, until dinner, until conversation, until the performance. I started the engine, because the next part of this story wouldn't happen in her office. It would happen at home, and this time, I'd be ready to listen. Evening came the way it always does, quietly, like nothing important had happened all day. The house looked normal when I pulled into the driveway. Lights on, curtains half drawn. The same peaceful suburban illusion we'd been living inside for years. Her car was there. I sat in mine for a moment longer than necessary, watching the front door like it might confess something on its own. It didn't, so I went inside. She was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, scrolling through her phone with that calm, composed posture that used to make me feel safe. Now it just looked professional, like she was ready for a meeting. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Warm, natural, unhurried, a perfect performance. "Hey," she said, "you're home early." "Slow day," I replied, hanging my coat like my hands didn't remember touching plane tickets to Sicily a few hours ago. "How was work?" she asked. "Productive," I said. Technically true, just not in the way she imagined. She studied my face for a second, not suspicious, just attentive. The way lawyers watch people when they're deciding whether a question is worth asking. Then she went back to slicing vegetables like nothing in our lives had quietly changed. We moved around each other in that familiar domestic rhythm, plates, glasses, small talk about nothing important. Two people expertly pretending the ground beneath them wasn't shifting. I waited. We sat down at the table. For a moment, I almost believed I'd imagined everything. She took a sip of water, looked at me over the rim of the glass. "So," she said casually. Did you fix the alarm thing? Yeah, I said. I checked the house. And? Everything looked fine. She nodded once. Relief, light, controlled, believable, Oscar-worthy, honestly. I set my fork down gently. Funny thing, though, I added. Her eyes lifted back to mine, still calm, still open. Yeah? I thought I saw someone earlier, I said. Near the house. Not an accusation, just information placed carefully on the table. Her expression didn't crack, didn't even flicker. A neighbor? She asked. Maybe? Silence settled between us, soft, polite, dangerous. She tilted her head slightly, the way she does when she's preparing a reasonable explanation. You probably caught someone turning around in the driveway, she said. It happens. Yeah, I nodded slowly. Could be. Another quiet moment. Then I looked straight at her. I also thought I recognized the car, I said. From before we moved. That was the first real test. A tiny pause. Barely visible. But I'd spent years watching her win arguments. I knew the difference between thinking and calculating. Really? She said lightly. Who? I held her gaze. Greg. The name hung in the air like something fragile that could still pretend to be harmless. She blinked once. Just once. Then her shoulders relaxed. Oh, she said. Yeah? He stopped by? Just like that. No panic, no denial. Just a clean, simple sentence. Filed, stamped, ready for court. He was passing through town, she continued, reaching calmly for her glass. Needed to drop off something from the old place. I forgot to mention it. Forgot. Such a gentle word for something that had been carefully hidden behind a fake trip to London. I watched her take a sip of water like hydration was the most important event of the evening. That's all? I asked quietly. She set the glass down, met my eyes without hesitation. That's all. Perfect tone, perfect pace, perfect lie. If I hadn't spent the afternoon reading letters about Sicily, I might have believed her. And that realization hurt more than the truth itself, because it meant she wasn't just lying, she was good at it. I leaned back slightly in my chair, studying her the way she studied witnesses, calm, patient, almost polite. You could have told me, I said. I didn't think it mattered, she replied softly. He was here for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Interesting how precise liars become when details are invented. I nodded slowly, like I was accepting the explanation. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Gentle, familiar, carefully warm. You're not upset, are you? She asked. There was real curiosity in her voice, like she genuinely wanted to know which version of me she was dealing with tonight. I looked at her hand on mine, the same hand that signed legal documents, booked flights to Sicily, touched another man in our living room, and I smiled, small, calm, controlled. No, I said, I'm not upset. That part surprisingly was true, because anger belongs to people who still expect honesty. I withdrew my hand gently and picked up my fork again. I waited until the plates were half empty, and the conversation had settled into that safe, meaningless rhythm couples use when they don't want to ask real questions. She was telling me something about a client. Names, dates, small details that sounded important but felt distant, like background noise in someone else's life. I nodded in the right places, added a quiet when required. Played my role well enough that she never paused to study me twice. When she finished speaking, a soft silence settled between us. Not tense, just open. The kind of pause where a normal husband might change the subject. I didn't. I stopped by your office today, I said calmly. She didn't react immediately, just reached for her glass, took a small sip, and set it back down with the same careful control she used in courtrooms. Oh, she said. Why? I wanted to see you, I replied simply. But you weren't there. Her eyes held mine, steady and unreadable. I had meetings, she said. Court prep ran long. Yeah, I nodded. They mentioned something like that. A small silence settled again. Then I remembered I might have left an old notebook there a while back, I continued. So I checked your office. Nothing in my tone suggested accusation. Just a boring, forgettable errand. She relaxed almost invisibly, not fully, but enough. Did you find it? She asked. Yeah, I said. I found everything I was looking for. That sentence floated in the air for a moment longer than it should have. Most people would have asked a follow-up question. She didn't. She simply watched me, quiet, attentive, measuring. A professional pause. Is something wrong? She asked gently. The tone was perfect. Concerned, but not defensive. Open, but not afraid. She was very, very good at this. I found some letters, I said. No accusation, just information. A small silence followed. Not long enough for panic, just long enough for calculation. Letters? She repeated softly. In a book on your desk. Her expression shifted, barely. Then, to my quiet surprise, she nodded. Oh, she said. Those. No denial, no shock, just calm acknowledgement, like I'd discovered old receipts instead of evidence of another life. Greg writes sometimes, she added lightly. It's kind of a joke between us. I almost admired the simplicity of that move. One of the letters mentioned Sicily. There it was. A real detail placed gently on the table. Her fingers paused against the side of her glass, just for a fraction of a second. If I hadn't been watching for cracks, I would have missed it. Then she exhaled softly and leaned back in her chair. You read it out of context, she said, not unkindly. He was talking about a trip he wished we could all take someday. You know how he is, dramatic, smooth, immediate, emotionally reasonable, the kind of explanation designed to make doubt feel embarrassing. I said nothing. Silence is powerful. Lawyers know that better than anyone. She held my gaze calmly, letting the quiet stretch just enough to suggest confidence instead of fear. If you want, she said gently, I can show you the letter. Not defensive, helpful. That was new. I nodded once. Okay. She stood, walked to the counter where she'd left her bag, and pulled out a folded envelope. Not rushed, not nervous, prepared. That realization settled quietly in my chest. She handed me the letter across the table. I opened it slowly. Same handwriting, same paper. But the words, different. No mention of shared mornings, no quiet evenings, no hotel, no us. Just vague nostalgia, friendly tone, completely innocent. I read it twice, then a third time. That's the one you meant? She asked softly. I looked up. Her expression held only patience, maybe a hint of concern, nothing else. For a moment, a dangerous, disorienting moment, I felt uncertainty creep in. Had I misread the first letter, mixed envelopes, let suspicion rewrite reality? It happens. People convince themselves of strange things when fear gets involved. She reached for my hand gently. Had a stressful day, she said. Alarm notifications, rushing home. It makes your mind connect dots that aren't there. Her voice was warm, grounding, reasonable. Comfort. Offered exactly when doubt needed a place to sit. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back on the table. I also saw flight tickets, I said quietly. To Sicily on May 24th. Another still pause. Smaller this time. Sharper. But again, no panic. You're getting something mixed up. I was in London during that period, she replied immediately. Work trip. You remember? Yes, I said. I remember London. She nodded, relieved that we were back inside familiar facts. My assistant went to Sicily that same week, she continued calmly. Maybe you saw her booking. Look, I can show you the tickets. She opened her laptop and showed 2 tickets. One in the assistant's name to Sicily and one in her name to London. I didn't understand anything. You see, you got something mixed up or didn't look at the passenger's name, she said calmly. I looked at her for a long moment. At the calm eyes, the steady breathing, the perfect composure of someone who had already prepared every answer. Then I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe I mixed it up." Relief softened her shoulders almost invisibly. She squeezed my hand once, grateful the storm had passed. "You're cute when you get jealous," she said with a quiet smile. "But there's nothing like that. I promise." I returned a small smile of my own, because in that moment, arguing would have been pointless. By the end of the evening, my thoughts had become slow and heavy, like my mind simply refused to process anything else. I felt exhausted in a quiet. So when dinner was over and the house fell into its usual nighttime silence, I didn't try to think anymore. I didn't ask more questions. I didn't start a fight that would only lead in circles. I just said I was tired and went to bed, because at that point sleep felt easier than understanding. Morning came too quietly. Then memory returned, not all at once, just enough. Letters, tickets, Sicily. I lay there staring at the ceiling. Then I remembered what I had forgotten yesterday. I took a photo of everything. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and opened the gallery. The letter, clear, sharp. His words exactly as I remembered them. Sicily, mornings, the two of them. Not nostalgia, not imagination, reality. I swiped to the next image. Flight confirmation, her name, Palermo, no London, no assistant, no confusion. Just facts. Quiet and undeniable. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the last piece of doubt dissolve on its own. From the kitchen, I heard her voice. "Are you awake?" Calm, warm, exactly the same as every other morning. "Yes," I said. "Coffee's ready." I locked the phone, put it back on the nightstand, and headed to the kitchen. She stood by the counter in a soft morning sweater, hair slightly messy, looking peaceful in a way that would have felt comforting yesterday. Now it just looked distant. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning? Morning?" She handed me a mug like this was just another ordinary day in an ordinary marriage. I took a sip. It tasted the same as always. That was almost funny. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Fine," I said. Another lie added quietly to the room. Small, harmless, meaningless. We stood there in silence for a moment. Two people sharing a kitchen, not sharing a life anymore. And somewhere inside that silence, a decision finished forming. I set the mug down gently. "I might work late tonight," I said. She nodded without suspicion. "Okay." No questions, no concern, just acceptance. That told me everything I needed to know. I picked up my keys. "See you tonight," she said softly. I looked at her for a moment, at the calm face, the steady eyes, the woman who believed the story was still under control. I walked out of the house without rushing, without looking back, closing the door as quietly as possible. I got into my car and sat there for a second, hands resting on the wheel, phone heavy in my pocket. Inside that phone were the only things that mattered now. Proof, silence, and a future that no longer included explanations. I started the engine. I drove toward the only place left to go, to a divorce lawyer. The lawyer's office was smaller than I expected. He asked a few simple questions. How long we'd been married, whether there were children, assets, property, accounts. His voice stayed calm, neutral, professional, like he was discussing paperwork instead of the slow collapse of someone's life. "Reason for filing?" he asked. I thought about everything I could say, the letters, the trip, the lies carefully arranged to look like truth. "Irreconcilable differences," I said. The simplest sentence in the world. Cold enough to hold everything without explaining anything. He nodded again, as if that answer fit perfectly into a space he already understood. "We can start the process today," he said. "I'll prepare the documents." I agreed. No hesitation. No second thoughts. When I stepped back outside, the day looked completely ordinary. Cars passing, people on their phones, someone laughing across the street. The world hadn't changed. Only my place in it. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool air, feeling something unexpected settle inside me. Not relief, not happiness, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after you stop waiting for things to fix themselves. I took out my phone and looked at the screen. No new messages from her, no missed calls. Of course not. As far as she knew, the story was still under control, still manageable, still hers to shape. I put the phone back in my pocket, because the next time she heard from me, it wouldn't be a conversation, it would be documents. And by the time she realized what was happening, the ending would already be written. 2 weeks passed quietly. Not peacefully, just quietly, the way time moves when something important has already ended. But the paperwork hasn't caught up yet. We lived in the same house during those days like careful strangers sharing neutral territory. Polite, distant, predictable, no arguments, no real conversations. Only short, practical sentences about schedules, groceries, and things that didn't matter anymore. My lawyer handled everything. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. At the end of the second week, he told me the documents were ready. 1 copy for the court, 1 copy sent to her by mail. She received them the next day. That evening, we finally talked. She said I had misunderstood everything. That stress had made me imagine things that weren't real, that the letters meant nothing, that the trip was exactly what she said it was. Her voice stayed calm the entire time, measured, confident, almost reassuring. The same voice she used in court when she already knew how the story would end. She reminded me that she was an attorney, that facts mattered, that assumptions didn't survive in front of a judge, and she was certain, completely certain, that in court she would prove the truth, protect her reputation, and leave with everything the law allowed. After that night, I moved out. Days pass. And finally the day of judgment came. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, just emotionally. Like the room had learned not to react to other people's endings. She sat across from me. Perfect posture, calm face, the same controlled confidence that had won her countless cases. Only this time, she wasn't just an attorney. She was defending herself. Of course she was. Her argument was clear, careful, convincing, misunderstanding, stress, jealousy, an unstable interpretation of harmless details. Then she presented what she believed was proof. The innocent letter, the London trip. Clean logic, clean timeline, clean story. From the outside, it looked flawless. My lawyer waited, calm, patient, like he already knew the ending of a book no one else had finished reading. Then he stood and handed the judge a thin folder. No speeches, no drama, just photographs. The original letter, real words, Sicily, the 2 of them. Then the flight confirmation, her name, Palermo, same dates. Truth doesn't need volume, it only needs to appear. The room changed quietly. I watched the exact moment she understood. A small shift in her eyes, the first crack in perfect certainty. She looked at me then, for the first time that day. I didn't smile, didn't look away. There was nothing left to prove between us. The judge spoke. Formal words, final decisions. I barely listened. When it was over, people stood, gathered papers, returned to their ordinary lives. She stayed seated a second longer than everyone else. Then she stood too. We didn't speak. There was nothing left that required words. Only by the time we reached the courtroom did I finally understand how she had managed to prepare everything so quickly. Most likely, her assistant had called her the moment I arrived, trying to protect herself from any trouble. My wife must have realized immediately that I could find the letters and piece everything together. So she asked her lover to rewrite the letter and altered the flight confirmation herself, changing the passenger's name just enough to make the lie look real. But she didn't know that I had a photo, and her whole plan fell apart. What about me? I freed myself from her lies and am ready to start anew. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.